1 week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. We are back on Searching for Ceiling, presented by 1 week season and Sharp Football Analysis. This edition, the Week 5 edition. If you tuned in last week, we had a lot of good stuff to come out on this spot. So join us again as we hunt for hidden upside. I am joined by the great, yes, live television, y'all. I'm joined by the great Rich Hribar. How we doing, man?
We're doing good, man. Like you said, we had a hot week last week. If you listened to the show last week, you definitely made some money. I was thinking about, we had some good calls. I was thinking about your Chase Brown call too, man. Chase Brown was amazing. Jaden Reed, we had Jaden Reed, the Steelers stack. All that was great, man. It turned out to be a really profitable week 4. So let's spin it into October.
Let's go, dude. The old Febtober is here upon us, man. Week 5, dude. Holy smokes, we're here already. We're starting to notice over the first 4 weeks, or I guess the first 5, if we include this week, a general trend of tight pricing. DraftKings has been super aggressive with their pricing, and FanDuel has probably been more aggressive with their player pricing. We've seen backup running backs are being priced up into the mid to high 5Ks. You are not getting these guys that are like 50, 5,300, 5,200 that are backup guys expected to come into big roles. We saw a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson coming off a 14 target game, see his price jump 1,000 on DraftKings. So pricing is tight, and that's a general theme that we're seeing this season. And I think the indicator that leads to that being the case this week is the expected ownership on the Bengals and Ravens game. So we're going to start there. That game has the highest game total of the week. We're starting to get these game totals that are coming up. We're starting to see teams figure out this too high. We're starting to see teams put up points. We saw it on Monday night. We saw it on Thursday night. So with this being the highest game total of the week and ownership not really going here, what do you see in this spot?
Yeah, I think it's because it's hard. It's a hard game to stack for a couple of reasons. One, financially, your terms of your salary cap, because the obviously the cleanest stack from if salary cap didn't exist, you'd say I would like that from a nice stack play Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Jamar Chase. Well, that's going to cost you like 46% of your salary at each site. It's just really hard to do. And I'm still trying to figure out what the Bengals are, to be honest. The Ravens have kind of shown us over the opening month, like through what they want to do offensively and try to how they've adjusted around Derrick Henry, and their upcoming schedule, I believe, is going to facilitate them to continue to do that, playing a lot more power football, a lot of RPO involving Patrick Ricard, Charlie Collar, probably reducing the number of pass attempts, which also makes it then in turn hard to glom onto some of the ancillary guys, like even Zay Flowers, who would have a great matchup on paper, right? Because how many targets, how many routes are these guys running? Opportunities. This has been the bugaboo for Mark Andrews. You go back to week 2, Mark Andrews was fine against the Raiders. It's just the last 2 weeks he's not on the field, and you can't score fantasy points if you're not on the field. And that's kind of hard. And then these Bengals, they bounce back, but it was against the Commanders and Panthers. And so what's real? Because this Ravens defense has started to figure out some things too the past 2 weeks. I mean, they absolutely just eviscerate the Buffalo Bills. They shut down the Cowboys outside of the last 8 minutes of that game when it was kind of a jailbreak situation. So what do we have here with the Bengals against the defense that has given Joe Burrow problems? And now Mike McDonald's gone, but Zachary Orr was with the organization. I would assume if just giving Zach Orr some even a sprinkling benefit of the doubt, that he is going to take some things that they did in unison working under Mike McDonald and incorporate them here. We'll see. But this has been a spot where Burrow has historically struggled, though.
Well, that's an interesting discussion. And I think it starts with Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor is typically
I should say that Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor is typically an offensive mind that more or less allows the game to come to him. It's very much Sean McVay-esque and Matt LaFleur-esque, and that makes sense because that's kind of his coaching lineage, right? But there's pretty much been one exception to that rule, and it's been these Ravens. We go back to the last 6 times, and these teams play 3 times a year. They're divisional opponents. We go back to the last 6 times these teams have played, and 4 out of those 6 games have resulted in game total or scoring of 51 points or more combined points. The 2 times they failed to do so in that 6-game window over the last 3 seasons, and I use the last 3 seasons because that's kind of when these teams have had the personnel that they've had, except for Derrick Henry, right? But 2 of those games where they failed to score 51 points, both came in the 2022 season. The first game, T. Higgins was out. The second game was a meaningless game for the Ravens. They sat Lamar Jackson. They sat Mark Andrews. And who is it? Josh Johnson at quarterback there? I don't even remember who they had.
Yeah, it was Josh Johnson.
Yeah, Josh Johnson. And he had like 50-something pass attempts in week 18 of 2022. So this team historically has put up points. And to me, I think it's a Zach Taylor being more leaning forward in the straps, more aggressive to do so, because he pretty much knows who this Baltimore Ravens team is. And they still have the defensive line injuries. He kind of knows that his team is less likely to stop Patrick Ricard. Oh my God, Patrick Ricard fielding that punt at the end of the game last week was really cool. The crowd went nuts. The sideline went nuts. And that's kind of who he is. He's kind of the unsung hero of this team. But Derrick Henry running behind Patrick Ricard is a scary, scary sight to see, I guess we'll say. So I don't know if this is enough to say it's a trend as far as Zach Taylor's kind of tendencies, mostly allowing games to come to him. Does that change against Baltimore? I don't know, but we've kind of seen these teams go at it over the last 3 years. So to me, if you're talking about upside from this game, it obviously starts with Derrick Henry and it starts with Jamar Chase on the other side. As you mentioned, though, it's really, really hard to play those two together because they're the two of the highest priced players on the slate. And then if you play Jamar Chase, you want to bring along Joe Burrow with him. So now we're talking about significant salary. So are there value options that are going to project well on this slate? We have Dontavian Wicks at 5K, who obviously we know what he has done when given the opportunity. But and this will lead us to the next game we're going to talk about. We just had Khalil Shakir ruled out about a half hour before this show. We have coach speak from both Joe Brady and his head coach that they want to get Curtis Samuel more involved. And now the player that was immediately blocking his snaps in the slot is out. So Curtis Samuel at 4,200 in this Buffalo and Houston game. You see anything there?
Yeah, it's this game is definitely hard to kind of get like super excited about. It's a bummer because like you want to get excited, like Bills, Texans. You're like, yes, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud. I mean, Houston has all this weaponry, and Bobby Slowick is still doing the Bobby Slowick thing. I mean, right now, Houston, 29% of their setter downs have resulted in the 3rd and long. Only the Giants and Browns are worse. And we're not going to have Mixon again. They are running suboptimal players on early downs. When you think that just, hey, swerve into this. You've got Nico Collins. You've got Stephon Diggs now. You're getting Tank Dell back. Let's wing it, baby. Let's wing this thing around. And Bobby Slowick is like, no, we're not going to do that. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to watch. And Joe Brady does the same thing. Like since Joe Brady's taken over, and the Bills don't have like the as sexy players as the ones I just named off. And it's like they're, obviously they still have Josh Allen, but Joe Brady has shown since he's taken over, they want to slow the game down. They want to throw shorter passes. And it's just like, I want to have a CJ Stroud and Josh Allen fun game. And are we going to? Will these coaches let us have it? I want to get on board with it. It's in the range of outcomes, but it's a bummer because when you look at it on the surface, it's hard to get there because of what these teams are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And if each side kind of needs to be pushed into some more aggression, where does that come from? On the Bills, it's likeliest to come on the ground, honestly, but they're, D'Amico Ryan's defense, and they clamp down. They're athletic linebackers. They clamp down on the run. So the clearest path for that kind of eruption to happen, or how do we get these two teams out of game planning mode, is probably through the Texans. Do you have any interest in Stephon Diggs in a revenge game? We know this dude's a kind of I don't want to say head case, but yeah, kind of. Do you think that Bobby Slowick pays any attention to that? Do you think they get him going early? You see anything there?
I think just from a matchup stance, without even getting to the revenge game stuff, it just make inherent sense for Diggs to be involved where he
Yeah.
works in this offense, where he's working from the slot in the middle of the field. That's where the Bills have kind of been their softest, and they haven't been soft really at all, except for against the run. But I mean, who's jamming in Cam
Yeah.
Akers at this
Cam
point?
Akers.
You know,
Yeah.
because they've had so many injuries over the middle of the defense. So I think just inherently that was going to push things to Stephon Diggs, and also this would be a spot as great as Nico Collins has been. And if you want to pay for Nico Collins, I have no pushback on it. Like you
Yeah.
play him, but if
Ever.
we know that Nico Collins probably isn't going to have 2,000 yards receiving, so like there's some of these spots like where it's like maybe a slowdown game. This would maybe be it because the Bills have been really good against the outside. You know, they face guys like Marvin Harrison and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Even before that, then Tua got hurt on that Thursday night game. Like they absolutely erased those outside wide receivers. The Ravens really didn't have to throw, so it's hard to judge. But they're soft. Basically, what I'm saying is they're soft over the middle of the field. I would say this would be a spot that we would have got to Diggs kind of anyways, standing out. Diggs is a kind of a weird one though because of where his pricing is. I feel like his pricing is for an upside stance because the types of targets he's getting, he still requires a lot of targets. And at a price point where he's at, that's a little bit trickier because like Diggs isn't a guy that's going to give you like a 35-yard touchdown at this point, right? And he's priced kind of up in that range where you would want like a little more flash that you're buying and not just paying for targets. But if he was a little bit cheaper, I would say we were going to get there anyways. But that's kind of where I am. Is like I wish he was a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you there across the board. I do think Curtis Samuel at least has some intrigue here, particularly at 4,200. I mean, he's been playing about 30% of the offensive snaps. That should jump into the 60 to 65 range, kind of where Khalil Shakir has been living. I expect him to be the primary slot guy with Shakir out, which is where he was playing. I mean, he's not a small guy. He's 6 foot, but he's not a big guy. he's built like a slot wide receiver. So all those things kind of coming together, the coach speak, Shakir being out, the lack of really red zone options outside of Josh Allen. I think there can be something there at 4,200, and he allows you to kind of a little bit more maneuverability throughout the roster at that price. Anything else to add from this game?
No, that's about it. It looks like Tank Dell's going to play. James Cook's always another one of these guys too. Like you can make kind of a squint to see it, but then like he's a guy like you always wish was just like 600 cheaper. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
always, like there are just other guys in his price range. I'm always more confident in.
Yeah. That said, there's always like these weird games that pop up over the last couple of seasons with James Cook where he just sees a spike in pass game role. Typically, that's not something he's known for. I mean, he is capable. He is a good route runner from the out of the backfield, but we don't see like the 6-7 target games from him normally. This could be a spot where I see them trying to get him going again without Khalil Shakir. Through the
past 2
air.
weeks,
So
Houston has not played good defense against running backs. 2 weeks ago, the Vikings running backs had 161 yards. Last week, the Jacksonville backs had 150 against them. So, yeah, James Cook might be a guy. Maybe to go back and look and see if he fits into more things.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like you said, he's a tough fit with that salary. All right, let's move on to another game that looks interesting to me, at least on paper and from what I saw on tape, and that's the Browns and the Commanders. And I lead it with what I saw on tape because Deshaun Watson actually looked better on the film from last week. His arm strength was better, his processing was better, his pocket presence was better, and his mechanics were better. So his footwork, his throwing motion, all of that looked better to me on tape last weekend. Obviously, he had the missed throw, the missed deep ball to Amari Cooper. The two were just not on the same page. Amari Cooper had 5 yards of separation.
Well, that was DeJuan Jones's fault. That's why DeJuan Jones got dragged on the sideline. Even Jameis Winston yelled at DeJuan Jones. So
that's awesome. I didn't see that. That's awesome. Yeah. So they obviously had that disconnect. Amari had yet another drop, leads the league in drops right now, tied with Malik Neighbors for drop rate. But and that this time it hit him in the chest and bounced straight in the air for an
Yeah.
interception. That was ugly. But Amari Cooper, man, against the Commanders. Are you seeing anything from Deshaun Watson? We could be getting David Njoku back. He practiced on a limited basis Wednesday, was held out, but it was apparently planned that he was going to get an off day on Thursday. How are you seeing this? Jerry Jeudy's been more involved lately. See anything from the Commanders, or not the Commanders, the Browns side of this one?
I am interested in Amari here. I mean, there was a big game on the table for him last week, which would have been his second in a row, because
Yeah.
he had a good game against the Giants. He had like you said, he was open for a play. DeJuan Jones misses a block. Deshaun Watson gets hit as he releases it. It ends up off target. He has another ball brick off of him. It's his fault that gets intercepted. And then he has the 82-yard touchdown that comes back on the holding penalty. It's been an awful run out for him, but he's run the most routes in the NFL of any wide receiver. He's still wide receiver 16 in target share. He's wide receiver 5 in air yard share.
Mm-hmm.
And he's facing a Commanders team that even last week when they played well, gave up a touchdown to opposing wide receiver 1 and has allowed the most fantasy points to opposing wide receiver 1s to open the year. They've already allowed 10 touchdowns to wide receivers in general overall, which is the most in the league. I am interested in him. I wish I could get to Deshaun Watson because I always want to get the quarterbacks versus the Commanders. I just think when you look at this Browns defense, and he threw the ball the best he threw it. I agree with you last week.
Yeah.
My problem is conceptually with the Browns, two things. One is the state of the offensive line is just still a problem. I mean, last week, no Max Crosby for the Raiders, who were already 31st in the NFL in pressure rate, and Deshaun Watson was under pressure 40% of his dropbacks. Like, the offensive line is an absolute problem for his team. And then my other problems with Kevin Stefanski, 2-time coach of the year, where the Browns now have played a month and they haven't done anything different on offense. Their offense is very stale. It's put Deshaun Watson in the shotgun and we can't block and we hope it holds up. They are in the bottom 5 in play action rate. They're in the bottom 5 in pre-snap motion. Like, where's the adjustment, Alex? You brought Alex Van Pelt in for a reason. Where is the self-scouting from the Browns offense? So that's what's holding me back from getting Deshaun Watson. There's another gross quarterback that's been equally as bad as Deshaun Watson. I kind of like more than him. But
we'll get to that.
But I can get to Amari Cooper for sure. I'm very interested in the other side of this because Jaden Daniels, as much as being a Jaden Daniels honk as I was, I want to see him these next 2 weeks against the Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens kind of get there, because they're as great as Jaden Daniels has been. He's exceeded expectations. And even if you want to diagnose his schedule being arguably the softest any quarterback's played through a month of the season, he still has exceeded those matchups. Mm-hmm. But I do want to see him at his price point deliver in these spots, because then we can start to have the conversations of handling him like a Lamar Jackson or like a Jalen Hurts, like in that company. But I do know he's going to scramble a lot in this game. You know, we know the Browns heavy man coverage, heavy blitz team. Jaden Daniels, we've talked it a few times on the show over the course of the season. He has a league high 40% scramble rate when pressured. He actually has a 17% scramble rate when he's not pressured, which is like triple the NFL average. And then 17% scramble rate against man coverage. So definitely if you're in the player prop game, probably Jaden Daniels rushing stuff's the way you want to play through him this week.
And with the Commanders, or I guess it starts with the Browns. The Browns are, like you mentioned, not a team that are going to kind of lean forward and unleash Deshaun Watson at this point in his career with how he has looked. But can the Commanders kind of push the Browns a little bit here? And I think potentially, yeah. We look at what the Commanders have done over the last 3 games. They've had 22 offensive drives, and that kind of speaks to how well this team is doing at managing the possession battle, the time of possession, So they've had 22 offensive drives over the last 3 games, 10 field goals, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 1 punt. That's pretty crazy. So can this team do enough against the Browns' fairly good man-heavy defense? I think potentially, yes. When I look at how they go about doing that, Brian Robinson is not expected to play now. He's missed practices on Wednesday and Thursday.
He did practice today.
He did practice. Okay, I didn't see that.
He's practicing today.
Okay, so he may not miss. But you look at the state of the pass catching core. Noah Brown has finally entered the discussion. Did you see Noah Brown's practice status today?
No, I can look it up though. While you go ahead, go for
Yeah.
it. I'll look it up
So
while
Noah
you're.
Brown is finally like in the role that we expected him to be when they signed him this offseason, as the wide receiver too. But this pass catching core is kind of, they've come into this weird state where no pass catcher is playing over like 70% of the offensive snaps. Even Terry McLaurin is in the low 70s. So I don't know that you need anybody other than Jaden Daniels to push the Browns here. That said, there are very interesting ways to play Jaden Daniels. I think he is a quarterback because of the high expected scramble rate that you mentioned. He is a guy that we can play naked, particularly in this offense. So I actually like a Jaden Daniels, Amari Cooper mini, and I don't think you need any other pieces. I actually like Deshaun Watson with Amari Cooper, because the thesis there is you're saving a lot of salary by moving from Jaden Daniels to Deshaun Watson. And if Jaden Daniels is succeeding, then that forces Deshaun Watson into the more aggression and from the Browns and getting this guy going. So the way that Deshaun Watson hits a ceiling game in this spot most definitely has to flow through Amari Cooper. So there's a lot of interesting things that I see here where you can attack this game environment where we expect there to be something here, where the field probably isn't going to get to. We might see some Jaden Daniels. We might see some Terry McLaurin. We might see some Amari Cooper, but I don't think either of these quarterbacks are going to be played in that manner. So did you find the Noah Brown practice situation?
There was no word. Someone did ask, because the beat that highlighted that Brian Robinson was at practice.
Yeah.
One of the first replies was Noah Brown ? And there was no response. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. So if Noah Brown is out, we're probably going to see a trickle down effect as far as snap rates go. I would think we're probably going to see Luke McCaffrey see a slight uptick. We're probably going to see, some of these secondary, tertiary guys. But I don't think there's anything there that I would jump out of my seat to be attacking on a.
Oh, right here, Noah Brown has been ruled out.
Okay.
Ruled out. Not even. Yeah.
Before even
what I
game plan. Yep. Thought. So hold on. I want to pull up the snaps from last week. Okay. So last week we saw Luke McCaffrey 44%, De'Ami Brown 25%, Noah Brown was at 67%, and that was 3 snaps fewer than Terry McLaurin, who was at 71%. Jamison Crowder was inactive. Olamide Zacchaeus got in there. So in my opinion, we're probably going to see a trickle-down effect. De'Ami Brown, probably a slight uptick. Olamide Zacchaeus, even probably a slight uptick. Luke McCaffrey, but I don't see anything here to be wanting to attack heavily, even on a point per dollar basis. Anything to add to that from the Commanders side?
No, not really. Yeah, I don't want to get involved with any of those guys, I don't think.
All right. You mentioned a gross quarterback. Let's talk about him.
Yeah, the early game I'm kind of looking at in totality is Jags Colts. For sure, for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, and I say a guy that also is running as bad as Deshaun Watson is, Trevor Lawrence, right? Obviously he's not as much as a villain as Deshaun Watson. So, it doesn't get that. But Trevor Lawrence, really bad this season. Only Anthony Richardson has a higher, worse completion rate overall. And Trevor Lawrence actually has the lowest completion rate in the NFL on throws under 10 yards downfield. It's really bad. But as bad as Trevor Lawrence has been this year, he's 25 of 36 for 8.5 yards per pass attempt against cover 3. We know our guy Gus Bradley's coming into Jacksonville. He's been a QB1 scorer in all 4 games against Gus Bradley. In those 4 games, the Colts have actually played more cover 3 against the Jaguars than any other opponent. The most they've faced multiple times over that stretch with Gus Bradley, 59% of the dropbacks. And on those plays, Trevor Lawrence has completed 79% of those passes. Colts just put their 3rd defensive lineman on IR this week. And in general, the Colts have just been a team that you're running a lot of plays against them, and they are 27th in passing points allowed per game already. So I look at that game, especially now that it looks like the report today was that Joe Flacco took more first team reps than Anthony Richardson. So I actually would think if either quarterback, I think this game still is fine. But with Flacco, we have more more efficient passing value. So yeah, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a guy I look at his price point. I mean, this game in general has just avenues to stack anyways. I think something like Lawrence plus Brian Thomas with Michael Pittman in the mid-range, or Josh Downs, is like totally viable to get you to some of the pieces that we talked about earlier. I mean, the Colts are just a team I kind of earmark every week that I'm looking to get involved in Colts games. So with Flacco playing, you have the cheap access to Flacco too now if he does start, which I said isn't official, but he also gives you another way to play this too, combat this game.
Yeah, so I wrote up this game, and the realization that I came to is the offense, functionally speaking and schematic wise, was a better functioning offense with Joe Flacco under center. And why is that? In my opinion, Steichen has built this offense to function better with timing and with reads. And those are two things that Anthony Richardson is not the best at this point in his career. He overcomes that with the mobility, which we've seen nerfed this season, and his elite arm strength. But I mean, the two spots where we've seen him excel so far this season, he had like Alec Pierce on a career game, 3 catches for over 100 yards, and that long score. So to me, the upside in this game environment actually is increased if we see Joe Flacco under center. That also brings in with Joe Flacco. Now we're looking at Josh Downs. We're looking at Michael Pittman, 2 guys. And the two early long completions to Michael Pittman from last week while Anthony Richardson was in the game, the first probably shouldn't have been thrown. He was bracketed in triple coverage, and the ball placement was exactly where it needed to be. But that ball probably wouldn't have been thrown from a veteran quarterback. The second was a double move slant over the middle of the field that he took for 15, 16 yards after the catch. But all of that to say, like, Josh Downs out of the slot, Michael Pittman, these are 2 wide receivers that do a lot of their work with timing and with generating space over the first 5 to 10 yards of the field. So they mesh a little bit better with what Joe Flacco is and what Anthony Richardson is not right now. Then you look at the state of the running back room. Jonathan Taylor's expected to be out with that high ankle sprain.
Mm-hmm.
It was called a mild high ankle sprain, so I don't expect him to miss a ton of time, but like, it's a high ankle sprain. He's probably out this week. So if we get Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson out, I love this Colts pass game. And I think you can bring it back with well, let's talk about bringing it back, or the other side of this game, because does Evan Ingram return? If he does, that really, really limits my interest in a guy like Christian Kirk. These two cannibalize each other because they're working similar areas of the field, and they're actually running similar routes as well. We've seen it over the last 2 seasons with these guys together. So that kind of leads me right back to Brian Thomas Jr. We talked about him last week. This is a guy that is immediately, to me, in my eyes, and I said this in week 2, I think, he is the best wide receiver on this team. And what I like most is, like, Brian Thomas Jr., the questions around him coming out of college were, we don't think he has a full route tree or a command of a full route tree, but he's kind of running a more or less full route tree right now, which is beautiful to see. So that adds to his weekly floor. We've seen, he scored a short touchdown last weekend on a leak play from 2 yards out. So yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. is very, very interesting to me. I really, really like, if we get Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor out, like the trio of Joe Flacco with Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, it costs 16.6, and that's exactly what I was attacking last weekend with Dalton doubles. So they need to average 22.1 fantasy points per player to keep you on a 200 point pace. Or a 4x multiplier. So I will be extremely interested in that, potentially even being like my starting point for single entry as an anchor to a roster if we get Anthony Richardson out.
Good stuff. That's my favorite one early kick.
Yeah. Anything else to add from that game, either side?
No, I'm with you. I'm on the Brian Thomas stuff. Again, like the cover 3 stuff has all been, like, single high stuff's been really strong for him. He leads the team in targets and 4.1 yards per out run. So I think it definitely is a good Brian Thomas spot for sure. And then I was going to be on Pittman regardless. It's a bummer that we'll probably get pushed to him, but because Anthony Richardson being out is going to make these guys popular.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the bummer, but I love it. I'm in. This is my game, man.
All right. I fully support. Definitely, if Anthony Richardson is out, I will have a lot of interest in this spot. We got to talk about one of the late games. Another divisional spot in the Cardinals and the 49ers. Probably going to see a lot of ownership on Jordan Mason again, but over the last 4 weeks, this is probably his best setup. So I went from being on Jordan Mason in week 1 to off over the last 3 games. And now I'm find myself back on, particularly with Debo back, with George Kittle back. How are you seeing this spot setup?
I mean, I see it the same way every week with the Arizona Cardinals. If you want to play someone on the opposing offense, you should do that. Any player. If you like any 49er player, I have no pushback on you. I'll do the Purdy. I'll let you do the Mason side. I'll do the Purdy pro angle for a second, just because what he's doing, I feel like, is actually being overlooked right now. In this era where everyone's complaining about not being able to throw the ball downfield, Brock Purdy is absolutely winging it, like absolutely winging the ball downfield. He's actually last in the NFL in expected completion rate, but he's actually has a higher completion rate over expectation than Jaden Daniels because the types of throws he's completing. He has 37 completions on throws 10 or more yards downfield, 11 more than the next closest quarterback. 66% completion rate in those throws. The league average is 46%. And it's the way he's doing this without Christian McCaffrey. So in years past, under Kyle Shanahan, is nobody played too high against the 49ers because guess what will happen? Christian McCaffrey's going to run down your throat. Yeah. But without Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers are seeing the most too high that they've ever seen under Brock Purdy. 53% of his dropbacks have been too high compared to 34% and 35%. And he's still doing all that stuff downfield. Absolutely nuking teams downfield. So I actually think he's being overlooked. This is a team that absolutely worked Jonathan Gannon last year. The 49ers in both games against the Cardinals did anything they wanted in either one of those games. I think they scored over 40 in both games. Might be wrong on that. I think it was 40 or high or close to 40 in each game. And this Cardinals team they showed like they're dead last in like every metric, through the pass, through the run. If you have a 49er, sure.
Yeah. I'm actually looking up what they did last season. 35-16 in week 4, and then 45-29 in week 15. So this team scores some points. And we've been talking about this over the last 2 years that we've been doing the show. Is like the question typically isn't will the San Francisco 49ers succeed? It's who succeeds the biggest. So like George Kittle is always in play. Brandon Ayuk always in play, Debo always in play, and now we get Jordan Mason. So Jordan Mason has seen 21 running back opportunities or more in all 4 games. He has a 29 opportunity game in there, and then last week he saw 27 opportunities. This is not a guy that's going to see the same pass game usage as Christian McCaffrey, but this is a guy who more or less, as a yardage and touchdown back, is going to live and die by how many times does he find the end zone. Against this Cardinals team, that chance of finding the end zone once or multiple times is increased. So that is the reasoning I'm back on Jordan Mason. I think the general fantasy community is too high relative to his status as a true yardage and touchdown back. But this is a spot where I'm okay eating that a little bit as compared to some of these other guys. I mean, Derrick Henry is the highest priced running back on the slate, and he is the definition of a yardage and touchdown back. So same. I think there are some fun ways to play Jordan Mason. Like I mentioned, the other guy in his pricing tier, or I guess the other 2 guys, Derrick Henry and Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is expected to see all this ownership. Derrick Henry, not, because it's really hard to play other guys in his game environment. Whereas Kyren Williams, you have value in Dontavian Wicks, you have upside in Jaden Reed, you have Josh Jacobs. So that is why I think the meta here is showing us that Kyren is going to get some ownership and Derrick Henry is not, because it's really hard to play the other guys in Derrick Henry's game environment. So if you want to be different, play Derrick Henry with Jordan Mason. It's really hard to do. You can do it. You can even add Jamar Chase if you want to. It's really, really hard to do, but you can do it.
Yeah, it looks like we're gonna have some stuff open up. You brought up Curtis Samuel. We'll see if like a guy if anyone's gonna do anything with Tyrone Tracy, like maybe on DraftKings, right? I don't feel good about that. No.
Yeah.
But we have cheaper receivers though too. You brought up Wicks. Like there are ways to get there. I have thought that the way I have started to build lineups, just in my early builds, that I want to play the throwback 3 good running backs this week and play mid-range receivers. We already brought up Michael Pittman and Brian Thomas in the mid-range. We'll talk about the Packers guys in the mid-range. I feel like I do want to try to find a way to make something work where I can have 3 of Henry, Mason, Kyron, or Josh Jacobs in my lineup this week.
100%. I love that shout. I've been playing a lot with both running backs from this game that we're going to.
Also, Purdy plus Mason is I brought it up with Purdy all the time last year, and it was a little bit different because of McCaffrey caught passes. But
yeah,
we're in an era where you stack these games, and you just have to get the offense right. And if you get the offense right with the quarterback and running back, you can get 4 touchdowns still. So like, I don't think it's off the board if like where you just like, you know what, I'm not going to do the whack-a-mole Kittle, Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk thing. I can just play Mason and Purdy, and if the 49ers score 5 touchdowns, I got them all anyways.
Yeah, and that's a very, very interesting theoretical discussion as well, because we have data over the last 3 seasons in the Millie Maker, excuse me, in the Millie Maker, 22.2% hit rate in running backs being added to a primary stack. As in 22.2% of the rosters that won a Millie Maker over the last 3 seasons had a quarterback, running back, pass catcher stack. I can guarantee you that the field is not utilizing a running back in a primary stack at a 22.2% frequency. So that is already leverage built in to a very, very simple, doing something as simple as adding a running back into a primary. So I love that shout. You can do Purdy, Mason, and then pick your poison really with pass catchers. Anything else to add from the Cardinals? We are expecting to get back Trey McBride, who I think was just cleared. I think I saw. So he should be back from his one missed game with a concussion. But yeah, I mean, I will keep saying it with this Drew Petzing offense.
We're the only show that I feel like the opening month of the season has been lower on the Cardinals every week, and the field keeps just jamming them in.
Yeah. It's like Drew Petzing, man. Brilliant.
Outside of Connor, you and I have always loved the run game, but we've always been the proof of concept in their passing game is just not creative.
No, it's static. The route structure is heinous. Like there's not a lot to like for me from Drew Petzing's pass game. So can Kyler hit? Can he do these out of structure things? Like, yeah, that's who Kyler is. He's very, very good at extending plays. He's very, very, I mean, God, like we talked about against the Rams, man, that was the best I've ever seen Kyler play. But that's kind of what it takes to overcome this Drew Petzing pass offense. It's not, he's not setting them up for success as we see in other spots. Yeah, that's all I got for that game. We'll move over to that one of the games that we talked about. Liking the running backs in and some spots for value here, and that's the Packers and the Rams. The Rams are still just bleeding yardage, and that typically results, because their red zone defense is not what it used to be, in touchdowns. So this is definitely a spot to like. We should have more clarity in the Green Bay Packers pass catching core with Christian Watson out. That said, we're probably going to see some Bo Melton packages. We're probably going to see some of these guys. And like Matt LaFleur is not going to change who he is because one player is out. So with that, we have Dontavian Wicks at 5K. Jaden Reed is at 6,500. We have Josh Jacobs in the mid 6s, right? Something like that. 6,500 as well. I don't know, somewhere around there. Can't find it. He's 6,400. And Jordan Love is a quarterback that I treat a lot like I treat CJ Stroud, in that unreal talent, but his play callers are typically a lot more reactive than proactive. So if that's the case, I expect Jordan Love to see some love, pun intended there, this week. At his price, there's far more paths to him failing in my eyes than a guy like Joe Burrow, who's priced right around him. So, how are you seeing this Packers Rams game? Rams side is easy. How are you seeing the Packers side?
Josh Jacobs, I think, is my favorite player on the slate, like from the 10,000-foot view. Just from a leverage stance, obviously, because a lot of these Packers receivers are going to be popular, including Tucker Kraft. And also through the Rams side, right? Like the Rams are bad. They're a bad football team right now.
Yeah.
I think they will be better as they get healthier, probably coming out of their bye. But right now, the only team that has trailed for more offensive snaps than the Rams is the Miami Dolphins, who have not led for any offensive snap because they won a game on a walk-off field goal. And as a byproduct of this, there's two things that are also like they're going this. One, since they've lost all their players, they've slowed down on offense. Sean McVay's plan has been to slow down. They had a 69% drop back rate in week 1, went to 61.5% in week 2, 52.7% in week 3, 55% last week. And this is while constantly trailing points, while constantly being behind in games. And as a byproduct of that, by the Rams playing slow and never leading, only one quarterback has hit 30 pass attempts against them this season. They're facing 25.5 pass attempts per game because of all those things lining up. This is a spot, I believe, that if you want to get Josh Jacobs going, and I still believe big picture the Packers do, even though we've seen Emmanuel Wilson work in and he has been good, this would be a spot to do it. Because of all those things lining up, the Rams face 27 backfield runs per game. That's 29th in the league. They face 32 backfield opportunities per game. That is all 29th in the league as well. Josh Jacobs only faced one team lower than all those, and it was the Colts, and it was his best game of the year by far. So I just think by all the things from a game theory stance, Josh Jacobs makes sense. From a matchup thing, he makes sense. Like he is like all these North Stars to me.
Yeah, I like that shout a good bit. And I think that the fact that both Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur are these guys that are typically allowing the game environment to come to them, they are elite at making those adjustments and making things happen once presented with the situation. But they're both these coaches that are not going to be leaning forward, particularly McVay without Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So I like that shout. I think there are far more paths to this game environment failing, as in like the cheap pass catchers that are gaining a lot of steam. I mean, Jordan Whittington, depending on where you look, is expected to be one of the, if not the highest ownership on the slate. I was all over him 2 weeks ago, and then I was off of him last week. And then Sean McVay did last week what I thought he was going to do 2 weeks ago, which was feature Whittington in that Cooper Kupp role. But yeah, again, passing volume down. But both of these defenses can be had on the ground. So I love the shout of Josh Jacobs, and I really love the shout of pairing Josh Jacobs with Kyren Williams. You get heavy red zone usage with Kyren Williams, who leads the league in red zone opportunities this season. And then on the other side, Josh Jacobs has the clear path to increased involvement. Man, I wish he had a higher red zone role at this point. But actually, you know what? I think his red zone opportunities might have shocked me. Do you have that offhand while I pull or?
No, he's run cold though. I mean, I know he's 0 for inside the. Oh, he's no touchdowns, obviously, but he's kind of unlucky. Like we're waiting to swing. But it's tough too because
entering the end zone. That's what it was.
Yeah, it's tough because like when they got in the red zone last week, it was out of jailbreak script, right? So it's always that's gonna skew things. They had to keep throwing at that point. And that's why he lost stuff. But I mean, yeah, Emmanuel Wilson's look good. I think it's Emmanuel Wilson. This is a game where I think between them they are over 30 opportunities regardless.
Yeah,
but
yeah. So Josh Jacobs has 13 red zone opportunities, 1 goal line, and no touchdown there. That is something that could change here. Josh Jacobs has looked good on tape. And in this spot against a Rams team that is allowing the most rushing yards per game, very, very clear upside for that to be had. So I like that shout a good bit. Anything else to add on this? You didn't really talk about Whittington too much. Any interest there?
Mild. I probably like Atwell a little bit more just because he's not dependent on the volume like Whittington is. I think, Whittington, when you play him, you're paying for the outcome of he has to get there through volume. I mean, 100% of his targets last week were shorter than 10 yards downfield. So like you have to have the 8+ targets, right, for him to get there. Whereas, I think in this particular matchup, anyways, the last 3 weeks, he's wide receiver 14 in receiving yards and second in yards per out run. I feel like he could get there on you can luck box on 6 targets. So you can get there and if he hits. And the Packers are giving up splash plays defensively. You would know, you're keenly watching these Packers games. They're just missing assignments, man. It's happened repeatedly in all 4 games where they're just giving up, splash plays, blown coverages.
Yeah.
So Atwell, would be kind of the guy if I was going those box. I will say though, I've kind of gotten to this point where my player pool's there, and I didn't have either Rams there. Neither one's gonna make it. Kyron's kind of the only guy that's making my player pool from the Rams side. But if you were to twist my arm and make me pick a Rams guy, I would lean Atwell.
I like that shout. Yeah, a lot of the Packers' issues in the back end over the last couple of weeks have been injury induced. They play a lot of zone, and that obviously requires a lot of communication. So really outside of Xavier McKinney, who has a pick in every game this season, they have looked exploitable for sure. Jair Alexander could come back. Actually, I don't know. Is Jair Alexander going to come back here? I'm going to look that.
Let me throw the other wild card at you. The guy, okay. So the Packers, I even said I was stumping for Josh Jacobs, and we know Reed and Wicks and Kraft are going to be popular. What are you doing at Romeo Doubs this week?
I think his role is the one that is going to remain unchanged. And that role is not very beautiful. He's kind of just playing these prototypical X-type wide receiver routes. His route tree is the most limited of all of these Packers pass catchers. So those prototypical X-type routes are a lot of comebacks, a lot of outbreaking stuff. So they're not upside generating routes. And we kind of know that's who Romeo Doubs is. He's not going to be the guy that takes a slant 40 yards to the house like Jaden Reed can. So his usage in the fact that I don't see his role really growing, paired with the pass splits that you mentioned earlier, he's just completely off my radar here.
I don't know if he offered any touchdown upside for you, but
yeah, I mean, he does.
He's not tracking to be popular at all from this game.
Yeah, I think I'd just much rather play Josh Jacobs and call it a day.
Yeah. So Jacobs is maybe my favorite player on the slate.
I like that shout. I like that shout a good bit. And I really, really like building rosters from a starting standpoint around those kind of top 4 on paper running backs that we mentioned: Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Jordan Mason, and Kyron Williams. You mentioned that you've been focusing on that earlier in the week, and I have too. That's interesting to see us both kind of.
Yeah, and I think it's naturally the way the slate shakes up. No Justin Jefferson playing in London. Amon-Ra's on bye. The Eagles guys are still on bye. We're gonna get hope to get them back. We've got CD on FanDuel, but not DraftKings. Yeah. You've got Jamar Chase as basically the top pay up wide receiver. Him and Nico as the top guys, and I think there's a pretty big gap. And I feel like if there's only a couple of those guys that can shadow realm me, that playing mid-range wide receiver and then stacking up on running back is how I lean right now. And we'll see if we get anything in the 11th hour today, like a player being out or something that maybe shakes up kind of those builds. But my initial inkling is I want to get 3 of those running backs of those guys we rattled off, because I just think they're in such good spots.
Yeah, 100%. We've been talking about for 3 weeks now how the state of the league is shifting to higher running back utilization. In week 1, there were 16 running backs to see 18 or more running back opportunities. In week 2, that was 19 running backs to see 18 or more running back opportunities. In each of those first 2 games, we had 6 running backs to see 22 or more running back opportunities in each week. So getting that volume against this now too high heavy league is a viable way to approach roster construction moving forward. Let's talk about tight end real quick. I think we have to single out this position because it is so gross.
God.
In the current iteration of the league, we have Trey McBride coming off of concussion. We have George Kittle, who is the widest range of outcomes of any tight end on a weekly basis. That's just who he is. And we love him for it and we hate him for it at the same time. Those are really, and then Brock Bowers and Dalton Kincaid are really the only pay up options at the position. What is interesting to me about this position is I think the field is going to look to salary savers on another slate where we don't have a lot of wiggle room with salary. There is a guy from a game environment that we mentioned earlier that we didn't mention by name. That's Eric All at 2,700. He has had, obviously he's a rookie. He's had 4 games in the NFL. 2 of those games now he has outsnapped Mike Gesicki. So the fact that he is already a more complete tight end than Mike Gesicki is at this stage of his career is telling to me. And that is also telling that Zach Taylor is trusting him to lead the tight end room in snaps in certain situations. He's done so in 2 weeks. So all of that, like Eric All is interesting. The biggest hubbub about Eric All is all of his routes are short area. He's not running like downfield seams like Mike Gesicki is when he's on the field. So you're going to need a touchdown. So if I'm playing Eric All, I am not doing so as a one-off. I am pairing him with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Anything to add on Eric All, who we didn't talk about earlier?
Yeah, the one thing we have now for a month of our sample size is the Bengals have kind of shown us how they're going to use Chase Brown and Eric All, and we can kind of now use the spots to kind of be to use the phrase again, the North Star of how we want to play these guys. So Eric All is playing basically exclusively in 12 personnel. Mike Gesicki's playing exclusively in 11 personnel. So when we have these games like against the Panthers and the Commanders the past 2 weeks where they can be in more run scripts than they were in the week 2, like we're going to see Eric All play more snaps and have more opportunities. Now, the question is how neutral and how much effective is the run game going to be this week? This is the same thing for Chase Brown. So Chase Brown, when the Bengals are able to stay in neutral game scripts, it's good. He's mixing in the offense and he's getting more work, but he's also consistently not playing in the passing game. And he's not used as a pass protector at all. Like the one constant we have through 4 weeks is that Zach Moss is running more routes and Zach Moss is pass blocking more. Chase Brown has 2 pass blocking snaps on the season. So
he had 6 all of last year.
Yeah. So if this is a game where the Baltimore Ravens, who have not given up anything on the ground, and they have had a lighter schedule, but they also they've allowed 1 run of 10 or more yards the entire 4 weeks. And it's the Xavier Worthy on the end around in week 1. So do the Bengals now have to go more 11 personnel in this game and abandon kind of what they've been able to have success? Because they've been a more balanced offense the past 2 weeks against the Commanders and Panthers, which inherently makes sense, looking back at what we believe those defenses are. And are they going to be able to do that against the Baltimore Ravens? So that pushes me off of like chasing, no pun intended, what Chase Brown did last week. Eric All's so cheap that like I kind of don't care. Like if you want to play Eric All, like 2,700 and you try to luck box into a touchdown, like play whatever tight end you want, man. Like go ahead and do it. But I do wonder now the way those 2 players are utilized, if they end up taking more of a backseat in this game, if the Ravens push the Bengals into a more pass heavier script.
I like that shout. That's I did not get to those splits as far as how Gesicki and Eric All have been utilized. So that's a good shout.
But he's 2,700. I mean, if you want to play a $2,700 tight end,
sure, by all means.
So, buddy, I can talk you out of it.
Probably the most interesting tight ends to me on this slate are the 2 coming back from injury. And I guess not Trey McBride because he just was concussed. David Njoku and Evan Ingram are in 2 game environments that we've talked about already on this slate. And Evan Ingram in particular gets about the best schematical matchup we can hope for against the cover 3 heavy Colts. Are you circling these guys at all in your builds this week so far?
And Njoku stands out. I'm waiting to see what the final kind of rostership looks like for Mr. Tucker Kraft. I mean, I kind of believe my early month process has been to just kind of fade the chalk tight end. Like we used to fade chalk defense just because it's not a position that's shadow realming us. And like, if you just come off of that guy, like last week, I wasn't into Brock Bowers at all. And Brock Bowers got steamed up late in the week because of the Devontae Adams, being ruled out after we even did the show on Friday. But, one of the weird things of Brock Bowers, and I brought this up in the worksheet last week, and I'm curious to see how it plays out this week again, is he is not earning targets against man coverage. And this was in his college profile. And I kind of just didn't care because he's was a great college player. But he, coming into this draft class, was the 2nd lowest tight end in yards per out run against man coverage. And I was like, whatever, he's coming into a zone meta. It doesn't matter. He's great after the catch. Obviously smashes the first 2 weeks of the season. And then like last week, I'm like, oh, I don't like this. The Browns, like it's in his profile to start the year. He's right now been targeted on 9% of his routes against man coverage, 28% against zone coverage. Like, those are gigantic shifts.
Yeah.
And he's facing a Denver Broncos team, again, that's a heavy man utilization rate so far to open the year. So I'm a little bit worried about chasing him, even though you would say, like, hey, no Devontae Adams, again, the targets are going to be there. I want to see, it's a very small NFL sample, but it was a little bit of in his college profile, and I want to see how sticky it is. I kind of want to give it some more time to breathe. But if Tucker Kraft's going to be the most popular guy, leading back to where I said, like, I kind of just don't want to play, especially because if we're not going to get a game where Jordan Love throws 35 to 40 passes, right? Like,
yeah.
And I just need an out where I just need Tucker Kraft to have like 3 for 40 or something. And then I can get there that way. So Njoku, yeah, and Eric All. Njoku and Tucker Kraft on FanDuel are the same price, basically. Like, so,
wow.
So I'm I'm kind of earmarking as like there on DraftKings. There's a wider gap. We're in Njoku's 5K, and then that's where Tucker Kraft is really priced down, and we don't really have a guy like Eric All would be the dude, right? Like, under there, you're gonna do Colby Parkinson, and buddy, I ain't doing the Colby Parkinson thing anymore.
No thanks.
So, been there. But I do kind of think that's been like my philosophy, is to kind of just play tight end through projectable ownership. So I'll probably be looking at this over the weekend and seeing who everyone wants to play, and then not playing that player.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. We're at the out the door vomit inducing. Give me the out the door play of the week, dude.
Yeah, it's coincide. It's really gross. And like we said, we talked about those mid-range receivers. We brought up Amari too in that mid-range. Well, I got another one for you, and it's Courtland Sutton. Okay. Just absolutely getting hammered with targets, and he's had a tough schedule. You know, the one game that he was serviceable was against the Buccaneers, and we saw last night, like, his Bucs defense can be attacked still. He is wide receiver 10 in opportunities per game. He is the wide receiver 6 in air yards, and he's going against a team that's allowing the 26th most points to wide receiver 1s. And honestly, they got off the hook last week because we talked about Amari's game. But Ladd McConkey, 40 yards and a touchdown. Zay Flowers, 70, 90 and a touchdown. Deontay Johnson, 8 for 122 and a touchdown against them. It's not the sexiest pick, but 5,500 and 5,700 for those types of target shares, it feels very similar to, like, you know, where we were like when Deontay Johnson was constantly priced down to open the year. We just need better Bo Nix play, which you might not get, but
yeah,
it's gross. It's gross. You wanted a gross one.
That is 100. That is on the table. I probably won't get there because I'm just like putting the Broncos defense in pen in a lot of my rosters. At 2,900, I think you can play Courtland Sutton and the Broncos defense if you want. I think that's completely viable. I honestly, we talked about the one guy that I think, or the one team we didn't talk about that is probably in the vomit inducing, but has clear paths range are the Panthers. We've seen just such a heavy emphasis, and even going back to last year with Dave Canales in Tampa Bay, such a heavy emphasis on his primary players. So both Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Johnson, they're still not priced up to reflect where their volume should be, even in a much more difficult matchup than they saw last week against the Chicago Bears team. And it comes back down to like how Eberflus is kind of structuring his defense. They have played really, really good football. What they're doing is they are playing outside in and they're playing top to bottom. So they're effectively forcing teams to march the field against them. And if there is a veteran quarterback that can like take this march the field approach, I would put Andy Dalton in the discussion of guys I would want in that situation. So Deontay Johnson at only 6,100, Chuba Hubbard still in a price that doesn't reflect his role, I think is at least interesting.
Yep.
I don't think you need to worry about bringbacks just because the dysfunction of the Chicago offense. They're in the one-off discussion for me this week. Beautiful, dude. Are you, I guess, do you have any other anything else to add?
No, I mean, just kind of wait to see what shakes out, but I think we covered a lot of ground as usual. Hopefully everyone, spills the strong finish of September into October, hit those cash lines, baby.
Let's go. Until next week, y'all. I am Hilow. He is Rich. You know where to find us. Head on over to 1 Week Season, get signed up for Inner Circle, get access to all the heavy DFS stuff. head on over to Sharp Football Analysis and use code TAKE25 for 25% off anything on the site. And that includes all of Rich's great work over there. Until next time, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 week season.